what's interesting, it shows really like how much the industry has changed since we started working in this in film. When
Yeah.
we started, it was actually film, and you'd go to a lot of different avenues, and you'd come out on VHS, and then DVD came out, which was great, and Blu-ray, and now there's streaming and lots of different other avenues. So yeah, it really does evolve quite rapidly as far as industries go. But it still comes down to you're releasing content, and how we produce it, how we distribute it might change. But ultimately, it's about still having good movies and good stories that people want to watch and engage with.
This is Truly Independent, a show that demystifies the indie film journey by documenting the process of releasing independent films in theaters. Each week, Garrett Batty and I, Darren Smith, will update you on our journey, bringing guests to share their insights into the process and answer your questions.
Today on the podcast, we chat with Brian Brough, the CEO and producer at Candlelight Media, and we talk about the upcoming release of The Carpenter. It's finally here, November 1st. It hits theaters. Go get your tickets now and dive into the episode. This is Truly Independent, episode 23.
Hey, Darren, welcome to the show and welcome to Brian Brough, our guest this week. Here we are for another episode of Truly Independent.
Yeah. So excited.
Yeah, how you feeling?
Oh, I'm good, man. We're recording this on a Thursday morning, and Carpenter comes out in previews tonight and opens this weekend. So that's kind of just the overarching excitement for right now. Secondary to the fact that we get to chat with Brian here on our podcast.
Right. That's right.
Thank you.
We're gonna get into The Carpenter. Welcome, Brian. Thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
Okay, we'll get into The Carpenter. We'll get into Faith of Angels. We'll talk about everything that's happening with that. But for this first section, we are thrilled to be able to talk to Brian. I've known Brian since college, and I think Brian, I don't want to spoil your introduction, but are you at 4,000 movies yet that you've directed, or where are you?
I'm probably in the 40s, so take out a couple zeros and you're about there. So I don't know. I have to check IMDb every once in a while to be sure, but yeah, I think in the mid 40 range. So yeah, I'm very fortunate.
Can you give us just kind of that brief intro, or tell us what that is, because that's incredible. You've had an incredible career.
Yeah, so our company is called Candlelight Media Group, and we started off honestly trying to sell the films that we did in college. So we started off doing more distribution, literally taking like some of my student films and some of my friends' student films and putting them on VHS and selling them in stores. And so, that gravitated.
I know Darren said that we really get into the details on this, but you don't have to reveal our ages.
Well, what's interesting, it shows really like how much the industry has changed since we started working in this in film. When we started, it was actually film, and you'd go to a lot of different avenues, and you'd come out on VHS, and then DVD came out, which was great, and Blu-ray, and now there's streaming and lots of different other avenues. So yeah, it really does evolve quite rapidly as far as industries go. But it still comes down to you're releasing content, and how we produce it, how we distribute it might change. But ultimately, it's about still having good movies and good stories that people want to watch and engage with. And I've been fortunate over my career that we started off with very, very small films. We did stuff in the religious space for a while. We've done a lot of mainstream stuff. Now we work with a lot of broadcasters and streamers. And so we've adjusted over the years to find what works for us. And then with that, being able to a certain degree, control or manage our production and distribution has allowed us to do the quantity that we've had. And I'm sure we'll dive into that a little bit later. But yeah, so that's how we've been fortunate enough to be able to do 40 plus films over the years.
That's amazing. So you're kind of a self-contained little mini studio. And tell me, like, you're obviously a multi-hyphenate. You're a director, you're a distributor, but how many other hyphens do you add to your title?
Yeah, get ready, Darren. Here comes the list. This is amazing.
I think it's good. Like I am able to do most jobs. I don't do them all. But like over the years, I've been able to learn what people do, which I think has been very good because it helps me know what needs to be done and appreciate the jobs that others do. That being said, it'll vary on the project. I always produce. I typically will direct, but not always. Um, we're doing a series right now that I'm also the DP on. And then there's a lot of other smaller jobs that, we transfer footage. So I do a lot of the DIT stuff. We edit. I color probably about half of our projects, and, just do whatever it takes to get the projects going and get them done.
That's somewhat of a recurring theme on this podcast, right? Truly independent is what it comes down to, is like, what needs to be done, and am I qualified to do that? And
if not, can I be qualified enough?
Yeah, right, right. And do I have the means to bring somebody else on that's better than me at this? Hopefully, but if not, then I'll figure it out. We got to get it out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Darren, it sounds like I cut you off on a question.
No, I was jumping in. I said I thought I had too many jobs. So yeah, but I think you framed it really well. Like, if you don't have the means, then you got to get resourceful, and that may mean learning a new skill, figuring out how to do editing or coloring or shooting or whatever it needs. But you're obviously driven by a passion for the craft and putting movies out in the world that you care about, and so I think what we'd love to focus on today, there's plenty of places we could go with your career and your experience, but really want to talk about distribution and kind of the approach that you've taken with your movies. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think you chase after theatrical releases. And so how are you getting 40 movies out into the world in a profitable enough way that allows you to continue to make number 41, 42, and 43?
For us, we actually did theatrical for a time when we were in the religious space, and it's partially the changing environment, and part of it is just the amount of work and time that it takes. As you guys have seen, it's going theatrical is a very big undertaking, and you have to choose to spend the time to work on it, or bring in a distributor that can manage the bulk of that for you. And for us, what we found was, since our films, we don't make huge films with huge cast, which you don't have to do by any means, but our films tended to be more geared towards television. And for us, at least, the advantage of going to TV over theatrical is from a time and cost standpoint. When you go to theatrical, there's a lot of advertising and marketing you need to do. You have to get people to show up in theaters. And we found we were spending back in the day, a couple $100,000 just in billboards to, along in Utah, along the corridor, just to try to get people to theaters. And they'd be up for 2 months, and you've talked to people like, "Oh, I'd never heard about your movie." We used to do regular TV ads, and then switch to social media and stuff. And it's very difficult and expensive to reach your audience with a marketing plan. And there's obviously some ways that are more effective than others. But so, then once you even are able to reach your audience and hopefully get people out, there's still there can be very high cost to getting your film out. And it was very difficult to have a profitable theatrical run. And back in the day, we were doing DVDs. So, you put your movie in theaters, it helps tell people, hey, here's this movie. And so when you came out on DVD, people at least had heard about it and would go and spend their $20 to buy a DVD. Now you don't even have that at that same level. You do a little bit, but not at that same level. So, so we kind of over time we just shifted away from theatrical and starting to go more to TV. And for us, the advantage of TV is once you deliver your movie, there are no expenses. You don't have to pay for marketing. The broadcaster markets it. You don't have to pay for ads. You don't have to pay for artwork. You don't have to pay for delivery fees and, for print fees and shipping stuff across. And, the process was much simpler for us. And so we kind of found our niche in just working with broadcasters, and which slowly gravitated to streamers as well.
Yeah.
Brian, I love that. And I love that concept. And, as an independent filmmaker, maybe listening to this podcast, you might go, okay, well, that seems like a great solution, because now your focus is 100% on making the movie. Like when I wrap a movie, I know that there's another year's worth of work in it. Mm-hmm. And you wrap a movie and you say, okay, I'm ready to, what are my next few projects?
Yeah.
Is it that simple, or how much effort is put into now selling it to a TV broadcaster?
The one advantage that we have, and I guess in being a vertical company and handling not just the production but also the distribution, is we don't have to wait and go off and shop and find a distributor. And back before we did our own distribution, so much time was spent. Okay, what distributor should we use this time? Where can they go? What are the projections and what's their reach and how can it perform? Now that we do it ourselves, we have the relationships with the broadcasters going into it already. A lot of times we'll go in and pitch concepts to them before we even make the movie, and they come back and say, out of these 10 concepts, we like these 3, so focus on these 3. And sometimes we produce it with their involvement. Other times we stay truly independent and then show them the movies afterwards. And so we do a little bit of all that. But you're right in the sense of it frees up our time, so we don't have to spend that extra year. And we have typically 3 to 4 films at different stages at the same time. We're post on one and trying to deliver another one and developing another one and about to start shooting another one. They're constantly in different stages that allow us to move from project to project. And then, once it's done and completed, we can hand it off to, the people in our office that handle the distribution, and they submit it to the platform and take care of the deliveries and stuff like that. So there's still some work to do on that side, but not nearly at the same level as theatrical, which is, especially from an independent level, there's so much, time and effort that needs to go into it to have it be successful.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. Can you speak to us a little bit about, if someone is listening to this and they kind of want to do the same thing? Some of the questions that come to mind, like what budget ranges are you working in? Are you talking $1 million, $2 million made for TV things that are similar to like what Netflix is doing, Hallmark is doing? And like, how did you transition into that? Because you made it sound really easy. Like, we just chose to stop doing theatrical and do TV, but there were obviously relationships and contacts and meetings and negotiations and stuff that had to happen. So maybe you could talk us through. I know that was a 2-part question, but
yeah, sure.
Talk us through some of those logistics.
Well, and even leading into that, backing up just a tad, was distribution has allowed us to be able to grow and to expand and to do those things. And so knowing your distribution route going into it, and in our case, being able to handle the majority of our distribution ourselves, enables us to move faster and make those decisions in a smarter way for us. That being said, budget-wise, I get asked a lot, what should my budget be? And I think it really comes, we can go to exact numbers in a moment, but the main answer for me is always going to be is make it for as inexpensive as you can without sacrificing the quality of the story you're trying to make.
Yeah.
We're talking about wearing a lot of hats before, and it's more of, you can have a huge crew, but do you need a huge crew? There's a lot of different ways to spend money on the film set, as we all know. And as a producer, especially in the independent world, it's what do I need to spend to tell the story properly, but how do I be efficient and frugal enough so I don't have to recoup as much? Because as we all know, it's making the movies the first half, making your money back and paying back your investors and having it be profitable. It's a whole nother challenge that everybody deals with on the backside, and that enables you to keep making movies, or you have to wait around till you can find another investor or eventually hopefully pay them back. So it is a process. But for us, our films, honestly, we've ranged from everything from about $200,000 to a little over $1 million. I think the sweet spot is in the $400,000 or $500,000 range. If you have a movie for a broadcaster and you're working with the Screen Actors Guild and actors there, it will cost more typically. I think the sweet spot typically is in that, just right around the $500,000 range.
Well, and when you say lean production or efficient production, I guess is your term for it, which is amazing. I can corroborate that. I went and visited one of your sets recently, about a year ago. And, Darren, when you're kind of driving down and you're like, oh, here's the cones and here's the barricades, and then there's the 14 white trucks and, the gear strewn out all over the place. That's what I was expecting, as I'm kind of like, oh, I'll find it. And I'm finding I'm driving down the street and I'm having to check house numbers to make sure that I have the right address, and I pull up to the house that's supposedly where you guys are shooting, and I guess all the gear was tucked away in a garage. And I kind of walk through the front door, and I can hear a little whisper, quiet, action happening. And Brian, I think you were in a room doing some DIT stuff, and your DP was setting up the next shot, and it was just so efficient. And there were probably maybe 10 people there, and and I always thought, I can just slide in under the radar and go in unnoticed. There's 10 people there, so no, one more body shows up and people know, like, who's this guy? And it was so impressive. I just thought, this is how you guys are getting these films done in an efficient and quick and effective manner. It was really impressive.
Yeah, and to that point, we don't go that small very often, but it's knowing knowing when you can be that small and when you need to grow. And like when we do our Christmas movies, those typically are a slightly bigger crew, and that's partially because there's so much decor that needs to go up. Our art department grows considerably, but we try to stay as I came up in a system which most of the world works in, which is, I've done shows where it's 100 people, 120 person crews. And, sometimes I think that's needed, but I think a lot of times the industry says this is just how we do it, as opposed to, I don't need certain people around, or we don't need to have 15 grips. We can get away with 6 grips, or even less, depending on what your needs are. So, and then the technology today really makes a big difference. We're filming a project right now, and we were talking about this on set yesterday about how back in the film days, you had to have a certain number of people on set just to manage the film cameras and to be loading and to be downloading the mags, and even just to make your FedEx runs every day and to send it off to the labs and stuff. There's just so many more people in the lights and the generators and all the stuff. And now with LEDs and how sensitive cameras are, you really can scale down to the proper size for what you can afford and what your project needs.
You're to go with that, you're also fairly well known in my mind as someone who seeks out locations that A, serve the script and the story really well, but B, are advantageous for your budget, whether it's a tax incentive or whether it's, a right to work state like Utah or a country. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Has that been the whole time that you've been producing, that you've been kind of international with your projects, or is that more recent?
It's relatively recent. We did it. Our first time that we actually really traveled, for international was right before COVID. And that was, we were looking at Fiji as mostly because of a tax incentive. In the end, it proved to be more complicated than it was worth for what we were doing, but we ended up filming in Fiji anyway, since we scouted it. Yeah. And then when COVID hit, we actually found it was almost easier to travel and to film than it was to stay here locally. And that was partially because, everybody had to get COVID tested, and we go somewhere, our own little bubble as we film. Whereas here, when we came back, we'd film, 2-3 days here. And if somebody got COVID, we'd be shut down for 2 weeks. And so we'd go and travel and never have any issues. And then at home, it's, everybody goes home, sees their family, and now you're around with other people that have been, spreading whatever else, and it became a little more difficult. So traveling was a way to kind of continue moving on and to have less problems during COVID. So that was one of the incentives for us. That being said, it was also, and I don't mean this in a haughty way, but I've done so many projects here locally that creatively I'm like, I just need to go find some new locations that I get excited about. Because filming in Utah has been fantastic, but I find myself going to the same locations again and again over time. And so it was like, okay, well, where else can we go? And so I'm like on all these different Instagram travel groups where I could see these beautiful pictures. And so I'm like, oh, Turkey, this looks cool. Let's go check out Turkey. And I had talked to somebody else that says Albania has some great looks and it's very cost efficient. Okay, let's go check out Albania. So we've gone, different places in Europe. We've gone to the Caribbean. We went down to Aruba and filmed. We filmed out in St. Martin. We've been to Tahiti a couple times. And it's less for the tax incentives. We really haven't taken advantage of any tax incentives because usually we're small enough, but it's just creatively, it's more of, hey, what can we go? What are some beautiful locations that we can feature and shape a story around those locations? Because we typically will work backwards. We like, okay, where do we want to film? And based off of that, and does it work for how we like to do our projects? And if so, now what's the story that can fit that location? And so that's kind of how we've operated a lot for that. And we find that our travel budget ends up taking the place a lot of our art budget. And so it's kind of been a wash financially in terms of what it costs to do things.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's fun. Having done one project internationally, well, I guess I've done multiple, but one as a producer, it's like, yeah, there's something special about going to another country, working with new crews, undiscovered locations that I've never been to before. Yeah, that's amazing.
Darren, I sort of backtracked and started talking production again. You had asked about distribution, and so maybe I need to probably get back into that mindset. So here we are. We finished. We're wrapping up the theatrical release of Faith of Angels. So we have a movie, basically a clean slate, and we have a direction on where we're going with it. For those, filmmakers that are saying, hey, what do I do? Like, yes, I'm not going theatrical. I now would like to get my movie on Amazon Prime or Netflix or Apple Movies or whatever it is, or just a fast channel. Or what are my options? And we hear terms again, Brian, like SVOD and TVOD and AVOD. Can you help us just kind of parse like what the next steps would be for an independent filmmaker?
Yeah, sure. I mean, kind of it depends on, what kind of film did you make and where does it fit, obviously. And whether you go theatrical or not, at some point you are going to go streaming. So, whether you go directly to streaming or go theatrical first and then to streaming, the process is still, relatively the same. But really it's it's deciding how you want to get your film out, because it can go, because I've talked to people lately, I think somebody put it very well. It's more of, it doesn't really matter. Most distributors that know what they're doing are going to be able to get it to the exact same place. So whether, you go with us or another distributor, or there's, dozens and dozens of distributors out there, pretty much anybody who's worth their salt can get it to the same company. So whether it's Amazon Prime or going to Tubi TV or Roku channel or Plex or, Netflix and Hulu are a little bit different in terms of how they manage things. But still, most people have those relationships and all the different streaming platforms out there. It's really more of finding a distributor or a distribution route that will pay you. Getting out there is not the problem. It's making sure that the money that comes in actually flows through to you as a producer. I hear all the time people are like, I got distribution, and it's like, well, great, but what does that mean? And having distribution that doesn't pay you is meaningless. Having it really comes down to how much is going to come back to you as a producer, because that's your ultimate goal. Is you need to recoup, you need to make be profitable so you can keep doing it. And so the different routes you talked about, Garrett, there's TVOD, which is really just transactional, which is rentals and purchases, and Amazon tends to be the best platform for that, for us at least. There's Vudu, there's still Apple and iTunes and stuff like that, but Amazon blows, for us, numbers wise, everything else out of the water.
Really?
And and that's, I think, they've just created a platform that's just really super well known, easy to find films on, and it's very frequented. So that does very well.
How much does that have to do with you being Candlelight, having a good relationship with them? Like, is there value in placement? Do they pay more because you have more titles?
I wish it was. No, for us, no. I mean, I believe with your bigger distributors, like when you're going with the studios, they can dictate terms more. As an independent distributor, we kind of go in we've been in with them for a long time, and they kind of had a purge about a year or so ago where they kicked a lot of people out. In terms of, it used to be like any filmmaker can go to Amazon, and now it's, if you want to go there, you have to be working through an approved distributor. But we have contacts there. A lot of it's just through their online portal. And then for the last year and a half or so, they've been extremely backlogged. And I think they're finally getting through that now. But it would take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to get your movie live on there. And we have calls and emails back and forth with our contacts. And yep, you're in the queue. We're trying to get to it. Yeah. So I think like in the last month or so, they've finally caught up, which is good.
you're talking about a portal. Is that different than, or what is the difference between just going direct to that portal or something like a Quiver or,
Yeah, for us, I mean, for the
another
portal, it's more.
aggregator?
I just mean more of Amazon's portal. They used to have like their direct video called Video Direct, and
Yeah, yeah,
so they've I think they've limited that access now to certain people now, but it's still that's how we deliver our films and go through that route. Talking about Quiver, there's also Film Hub and other companies that are more of aggregators. They do
yeah,
basically the same thing. They just act as a middleman to get it to those places. And we talked to it's been a little while, like Hulu, and and they were just more of, okay, here's certain companies that know how to deliver to us. So you have to at times use aggregators to deliver.
yeah,
We usually try to circumvent that and say, well, we can do it too, and we'll do tests and show them we can, and cut out one more layer. So
yeah, yeah.
Well, in every layer, that could be 10, 15, 25% that you're giving away of your revenue, which you do
yeah,
that multiple times and you got nothing on the back end.
and that's an important thing to find with a distributor is I don't. At least a time ago, before we started doing our own distribution, we found that you go with a distributor and they hire a friend who distributes this part of it. And you're right, everybody takes their 20 to 30%, and everybody else is making money off your movie, but there's not much left for you. So finding a distributor that can go as directly as possible really is to your advantage. And then really it's just asking the questions. And most companies will be very straightforward with you, but you have to ask the questions.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, and then you mentioned something also, Brian, in another conversation we had about fast channels,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a totally new thing. Is that something that you as a distributor have set up, and now your content goes on that as well, or what? Can you educate me on that?
I mean, just to help differentiate for those that don't know. I mean, you talked about TVOD, which is transactional. There's SVOD, which is subscription based, like a Netflix and Hulu kind of. Now everybody's going somewhat AVOD. AVOD is ad supported. Fast channels are relatively new in the streaming space. It stands for free ad supported streaming, and basically it's kind of old school television in that it's 24-hour streams. And it's people, whoever has a channel, they program it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they get it out there. The difference is instead of coming over the airwaves or through cable, it's now more delivered digitally. So there's a lot of, you'll find is there's fast channels on almost every TV box now. So if you have a Samsung, they have Samsung TV Plus. Vizio has their Vizio Smartcast, or there's actually a term for it that escapes me right now. LG has theirs. So within the TV boxes themselves, they have whatever they call it, this TV guide that lists a couple hundred channels now, and you can go in and watch the stream and turn it on. And instead of choosing your show, you choose your channel and just let it play like we did back when we grew up. That being said, is you also have a lot of the places. So like IMDb TV has their own, which is Amazon as well. They have fast channels now. Roku channel has a fast channel component. Tubi TV has a fast channel. Pluto TV is a fast channel. So they've popped up everywhere. And with that, you can't just go, I'm going to go fast channels. You have to go now, just like with regular TV, and find what channel does your content fit on, and will they come and license or do a deal with that. And that being said, for us, we have years ago when fast channels were just coming out, we took advantage of an opportunity to create our own fast channels. So we now have our own branded channels, which is called Spark TV. We started off on Samsung outside of the U.S., which does, and then there's Samsung within the U.S. It does very well. There's LG, and like even with the Roku channel, for example, they have their AVOD component, which is on demand. You pick stuff, and then we have a Spark TV channel on the Roku channel for their fast channels. And I am shocked every quarter when we get the reports how well fast channels do, because I don't watch content that way. And so I just assume everybody's like me. I think that's important to realize as a producer is just because you consume content a certain way does not mean that your audience does. And our fast channels on a lot of the platforms blow the regular watching out of the water. Wow. We're talking 4 or 5 times the revenue in a quarter based off of compared to AVOD. And so people like to turn on their TV, pick a channel, and just let it play. And maybe they'll do the dishes in the background, or maybe they just like to sit down and watch 5 movies in a row. I don't know, but it is a great way to get content out there. And to a producer's advantage, honestly, you can take your show, and unless you have an exclusive deal with a fast channel, you can go and be put on 20 fast channels. People will go in, and just like regular TV, they have, here's my 2 or 3 channels I'll watch. We do a lot of, rom-com movies, or, romantic dramas and stuff like that. So, for us, is we have our fast channels, but put it on other people's fast channels where people are looking for that content. If you do horror, there's a million horror fast channels. Get it on as many as you can. You guys have been doing more faith-based stuff. There's a lot of family-friendly and faith-based channels. You put it out there, and you put it out there at the appropriate time. We don't start there, but once you go through your other, we still window a little bit in digital releases. And fast channels are a great source of additional revenue that wasn't around a couple of years ago.
That's awesome.
Nice. Man, oh man. So I'm trying to think of, we're at 30 minutes. I don't want to take too much of your day. I know you're in the middle of production too. But I'm curious, you've talked a few times about what's changed. And so I'm curious if you could speak maybe a little more to that, and what's coming, and what producers and filmmakers need to be thinking about with their movies. If they've got a project, they've been gearing up, they've been listening to our podcast, they're finally taking the initiative to go raise the money because of us. You're welcome. Just kidding. But, they're finally going to go do it. How would you recommend an indie filmmaker that's got a $300,000-$400,000 movie goes out to the marketplace for the first time?
I think number one is be realistic about what you're producing and what your budget range is for that. I think there's that the misconception a little bit of, I'm making a movie and I got to spend $1 million, and I got to pay myself this huge salary, and I got to have everything else. And if it's make sure that your budget range is in line with what your show needs to be, and that it's recoupable. And whether it's going to AFM, AFM what starts I think next week in Las Vegas. Whether it's going and meeting with, and distributors will talk with you. You have to be willing to reach out to them, but go talk to them and find out, what can you recoup? What can you do for me? Here's my film. Do your homework and know where it goes and what kind of return a film like yours can make. Then frankly, make a good movie. I had a distributor call us once. It's like, how are you getting people to watch your movies? What are you doing marketing wise? I'm like, we just put it out there and tell people it's there. If you make a movie that people like to watch, they watch it and they tell their friends. And you don't have to push as hard from a marketing perspective if it's a movie that people like. And so, not every movie is going to be the popcorn movie, and that's fine. But it's, you can't fake people's responses. You can't make people like your movie. It's if you tell a good story, and that you're know your audience and know what they're going to want to watch, and if you make a good movie for them, they'll watch it and share it, and that's how eventually, from a streaming standpoint, the algorithms will pick it up and start recommending it more and more and more. And I think that's kind of the other thing to keep in mind as far as like the changes that have happened is you're making a movie for an audience, obviously, but you have to make a movie, and from a distribution standpoint, that the algorithms will help people find it. So the title of your movie, have something that's catchy, that's memorable, that represents your movie, but also that makes it easier for people to discover. Have amazing artwork. We're down to the world of, here's a thumbnail and the title. Do I want to watch it? And in making your movie, you need to draw people in now in the first 2-3 minutes. Don't do a 5-minute opening credit sequence and expect people to get through it. They'll change it, and before it even starts, because they don't want to watch 5 minutes of credits. It's how do you consume content, and a lot of people will be similar. Like, I'm very impatient as a viewer. I'll watch 10 minutes, and if I'm not interested, I'll change and watch something else. And I think some people are even less patient than that. So it's making sure that you can draw people in fast enough, because there's people that go to say, hey, I want to watch your movie. Most people are going to be flipping around and go look at a thumbnail and go, oh, let me try this one out. And, they're not paying for it most of the time. They're just going to click on it and watch, and they continue watching if they like it, and they change it if they don't. So make something that's engaging, that's fast, fast to be able to pull people in. And not that it has to be an action movie by any means. None of our movies are action movies, and it's here's our character and here's some romance, but it works for the audience that likes our content.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you guys are doing it, and you're doing it well, and it's so cool to see. One of the things that's most impressive is just how you've adapted. Again, you started out saying, "Hey, we did this for VHS," and with every iteration of the industry, you guys are finding a way to continue to make films, create amazing content, and feed your audience, which is awesome. Brian, you've been generous with your time. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that our listeners should know about you, either your next project or where we can find more of your content?
We're just kind of trying to keep as busy as we can. We're doing our first big series right now that I wish I can tell you the name. I'm not sure what we're going to release it under. And that's a whole new undertaking to do a series, an 8-episode series independently. So it's just movies are one thing and series is a whole new ballgame as we're discovering. So, but it's been fun to go in and figure that out. So yeah, we're excited about that. But honestly, my advice to filmmakers is going to be go off and find a way to make it happen. Don't wait for the perfect conditions. Just, be smart about things, but go off and produce your content. And for me, that's the best way to learn and to do things is just get hands-on and, don't just dream about it, but start executing. And even on a small level, it's better to make a small film and get it out there and learn from it than to wait for that perfect film, that perfect budget. And, it's like you guys have experienced yourselves is, go off and do your very best, learn from it, and continue to move forward from that.
Yeah. Wise words, man. Thank you. It was great chatting with you. I look forward to the next time we get to hang out at a producer meetup or wherever it might be. And thanks for making the time today, Brian.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Hey, indie filmmakers and movie lovers. This show is sponsored by Purdy Distribution. Since 2011, they've been bringing incredible independent films to theaters, like Garrett Batty's The Saratov Approach, T.C. Christensen's Love Kennedy, and McLean Nelson's Once I Was a Beehive. They've worked with top-notch directors like Mitch Davis and Mark Goodman, specializing in family, faith-based, and funny films. This year alone, they've released hits with JK Studios like Go West and Villains Inc., and have even branched out internationally with films shot in South Africa and Japan. Purdy Distribution works closely with indie filmmakers, designing personalized distribution plans, whether it's a theatrical release or straight to streaming on platforms like Amazon, iTunes, Google, and more. If you have a PG or PG-13 film ready for the world, think about reaching out to Purdy Distribution. They're approachable and knowledgeable, ready to help you visualize your film's distribution. Even if your film isn't fully polished, they can offer valuable guidance. Plus, if you need that crucial distribution piece for investor packages, Purdy Distribution can provide a letter of intent to distribute, helping you secure funding without locking you into a contract. Mark your calendars for Purdy Distribution's upcoming releases: Tokyo Cowboy on August 30th, the digital release of Thabo and the Rhino Case on September 1st, Faith of Angels in theaters on September 12th, Villains Inc. on Amazon and iTunes on October 1st, and The Carpenter on November 1st. To stay updated on these releases and more, sign up for their newsletter at purdydistribution.com. That's P-U-R-D-I-E distribution.com. Now, back to the show. Oh man, that was great. I wish we had 3 times as much time with Brian because I feel like I had so many more questions about tell me exactly how you're doing all the things you're doing because he's figured so many things out.
Yeah, that was a very high level overview. He's so great to even give us that information. But yeah, I mean, I'd almost want to have him on and just choose a title. Like, hey, let's look at your IMDb. Give me a title on this, and let's go over the budget and how it recouped and the methods that were used.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, if you're like me, you could dive in and go to IMDb Pro and start researching and figure some stuff out. But yeah, we can go direct to the source, and how cool that he was willing to share some of the specifics with us. Man, it just makes me excited for what's coming because if they're doing, even movies half our size, given the last few movies, like, and finding profitability to keep doing 4 movies a year or 3 movies a year, whatever their output is, like they've figured something out. And it makes me really excited for the potential of Faith of Angels and The Carpenter in post-theatrical distribution to not only make money, but to be able to reach a broader audience than we did in theaters.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cool model, and that thought went through my head too. It's like, okay, well, if we're in the $1 to $2 million range, and doing 1 to 2 movies a year, or certainly maybe this has been 2 years, then yeah, you split that, you fraction that, and go, hey, for in the next 2 years we could do 4 to 6 movies for that cost. Part of me, I love the theatrical release. Like, I love that theatrical experience and watching movies with the community and kind of really having a voice in the culture of the genre that we're working in. And I don't know that we get that with, direct to TV.
Yeah.
But, you have to, I guess, pick your passion. Like, is it just making movies, which we love doing, or is it experiencing a movie with an audience?
Yeah.
Which I also love doing.
Well, and I think he said something interesting, which was like, we've been very involved in the release of these movies. And it doesn't have to be that way. If you have trusted partners that you've worked with that have delivered the results you're after, even as the producer or the executive producer, owner of the movie, you can still kind of say, all right, here's the next one. And they put it into the pipeline and they know the play. And you show up and do PR, and you show up and do the premiere, and you travel a little bit for a week or two, and then you go back to the movie. Well, that's very different than 6 months of your life completely dedicated to releasing 2 movies. So there is a future that I think we're even building towards, or at least we're helping you build towards, of how do I do a movie a year and release a movie a year without having to completely shut down one or the other in order to make it work.
Yeah, and it is we that we're working towards, right? Because it all reciprocates. Nobody hires, no movie is made just in isolation. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, last night I got an email from our foreign distributor, our foreign sales agent for Faith of Angels. And I think that this is exactly what you're talking about, where we say, look, I'm not out there knocking on doors of foreign distributors. We turned over to a sales agent. They emailed me last night and said, hey, here's some cover art we've been working on. What do you think? And it wasn't, can you design cover art? Or me trying to hire a graphic designer or whatever it is. They're just doing it. It is in their pipeline. And so they're saying, hey, we're going to AFM next week. Here's some cover art. What are your thoughts? But whether I like it or not, they're going to go and sell the movie. So it's a good relationship to have with them, because they're saying, we want your input, but I have to acknowledge, hey, they are the experts in this space. They're going to know what sells. And yes, I trust them. I said, great. I can't wait to show up at their booth at AFM and shake hands and thank them for all their hard work they're doing.
Yeah. And I think we're just at the very early stages with these 2 movies. We're working with a brand new team that you hadn't worked with before. We hadn't worked with this, Purdy Distribution 2.0 team. We hadn't worked with Film Frog before. And so it's like, okay, if we dial that in, whether it's with them or with different partners, like finding someone who can go, great, you've got this part of it. The same way we're on set, you say, hey, you're producing, I'm not going to produce. You could say, great, you're distributing, I'm not going to do that. You're doing marketing, I'm not going to do that. And come to the weekly meeting for 30 minutes, and give some input, but that things are moving forward and that everyone's on the same boat, rowing to the same destination, which is, let's get as many people to see this movie as possible. So I think that's exciting that we're getting there. I don't know that we got there on Faith of Angels. I'm excited to see how Carpenter does starting this weekend. But that's the bigger picture of where we're at in the process of like, man, we're not a studio. We're not aspiring to be a studio. But if we can get some trusted partners that we just know, we like these guys for foreign, we like these guys for digital, we like these guys for marketing, these for distribution, and you have a team, then you just go, all right, everybody, at the same time, we're all going to get together and start the next movie, and here it is. And as we talked about last week with Kirk, it's like, actually, we start with all of them at the beginning. Hey, here's the next movie. It's greenlit. It's funded. We're going into casting. Who has opinions about this? Sending them the script or the synopsis and saying, here's the next one. What can we be doing now in terms of whatever you're responsible for to make it a success?
I think people want to be a part of a success. They want to be a part of a good movie. Like Brian said, just like his job is to make a good movie. Mm-hmm. And that makes everybody else's job in distribution easier. And so, yeah. And I think that there's that reciprocated trust. You say, look, I trust Premiere to do a great job on the artwork and the foreign sales. They're going to trust me to make a good movie. And so, yes, send them the script. Hey, what do you think? What are your thoughts? What kind of casting decisions need to be made to help you? But ultimately, they can make recommendations. But then they say, you do what you do, we'll do what we do, and let's do it over and over.
Yeah. I was at an investor meetup earlier this week, like a bunch of VCs that were getting together and talking about themselves, essentially. But there was a line that was great that I'd never heard before, and I think it applies here. Investors invest in lines, not dots. And so what that means is, like, if you're a filmmaker like Garrett Batty and you have a string of movies that are very consistently good, all kind of in the same genre space, then that's a line. You can connect the dots, each movie representing a dot. You can connect them and see a line and the trajectory of your career. And people can go, well, I want to be a part of whatever the next dot is because it looks like the line's going up. Whereas, and that's an easier thing to sell than, hey, here's a dot to invest in. And we don't know whether the line goes up from here or down from here, whether there's a second dot to benefit from in the future. And so I think that is a nice encapsulation of why it's hard to raise money for your first movie, why it's easier as you go along, and kind of the mindset of people that are saying, oh, I want a career here. It's like, okay, well, what kind of line are you drawing with the movies that you're going to make?
I got an email from one of our investors on Faith of Angels, and there's always projections, and we always hope for a big box office release, but we always, I'm always very transparent and realistic in my conversations with investors. We have, this may or may not, and here's what we're doing to mitigate your risks, but the risk is still there, and so we sent the email kind of showing the wrap up of our theatrical, and here's what we did, and here's what we anticipate coming in from that, and so forth. And it was certainly lower than expectations, but the response from them is like, what's next? Like, let's do it again. This has been fun, and they want to be a part of what we're doing. I think that supports what you're saying about the dots versus lines. Like, let's continue to build.
Yeah.
So that was, it's a good spot to be in.
Yeah, it's a real good spot. And I'm even more emboldened now hearing Brian talk about all the opportunity there is outside of the theatrical release, which is the most expensive way to release your movie by far. As he talked about, he has zero marketing budget for his movies. He sends the files to the distributor or the channel, and they handle it all from there. So that's great. And especially if they're doing it themselves, they cut out a 20 or 30% split with the distributor or sales agent that would be doing that work for them. So it's pretty smart on his side. All right. Why don't we talk about what's going on in our lives right now? It feels like we're due for a big update today, of all days.
Here we are. This was the goal, right? I mean, we set out to release the movie. What did we say on our first episode? We are going to release Carpenter. We were going to talk about Faith of Angels.
Yeah.
On 600 screens across the country, November 1st. I think we hadn't even chosen a date yet. 600 screens across the country. So this is it. We're recording this a day before our national release. We had our Dallas. I'm in a hotel room right now in Dallas. Red carpet premiere last night with Film Frog there, with our distributor there, with the Krebs family there. And it was just like the culmination and both the finish line and the starting gun for the next phase. But it was just a neat spot to be in, and a meaningful night and lots of people in attendance. 500 people in the or whatever the auditorium would hold, whatever it held, it was full. And I think the Krebs family got what they were hoping for as far as getting this movie out there.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. And I should mention, too, because I think it deserves mentioning, I met Kenny Krebs, the executive producer, financier of The Carpenter, at the Utah premiere last week. I'd never spoken with him, never been on a Zoom call with him, never met him. So it was the first time. So I went up and introduced myself as the guy that spent all his money. And he was glad to meet me and said I did a great job. But this was very unique. I don't know that I've heard these kind of words out of an executive producer's mouth before. So it's worth sharing in the sense of maybe look for investors that have this kind of ethos. But he said, we got everything we wanted once you guys delivered the movie. They funded a pretty decent budget, internationally filmed family legacy project. And the goal was to have something for their family that they could watch with their family and friends and local theaters. And they did that in December of 2022. And that was it for them. And so they really did kind of sit on the movie for a year and a half, not because they were waiting, but they really didn't have an intention of putting the movie in theaters. But at some point, and I don't know if it was a conversation you had or maybe that Cameron and Colin had with their dad, but there was a point where he realized that as much as he got from the movie and being able to have the outcome of a family legacy project, for the filmmakers that worked on the movie, the outcome comes from releasing the movie theatrically and to an audience and to the marketplace. And he really was being fairly altruistic and saying, well, I'm going to fund a decent theatrical release, 600 screens, because I want to give back to the filmmakers that made the movie and have them be able to point to this as a successful thing that they worked on. That's kind of unheard of.
Yeah, you're 100% right in your assessment. It is a very rare, unique opportunity, and I don't even want to call it opportunity because that sounds opportunistic, but it's just a unique situation that I've never experienced in my career, and he's certainly done what he's said he is going to do, which is fund a nice theatrical release and allow us to put together the team and really make that happen. And as we were standing there at the red carpet premiere, we're showing him a few reviews, and we know that The Carpenter is just a unique premise. I mean, just not only behind the scenes, but even the movie, the product itself, is such a obviously that's gonna. I think the product is certainly an evidence of the uniqueness of the team behind it. So you have this family that says, we just want to make a family movie. And now we're putting it out there, and the people, we're getting reviews and a variety of wonderful responses. And mostly the tone is, wait, what? Like, what is this? A faith-based movie with MMA set in Nazareth? And it's just, people can't look away. And so we're showing some of those reviews to Kenny, and he was just almost emotional, saying, the reviewer saying, this could potentially be the greatest movie ever made, or, a disaster. And Kenny sees that and goes, he thinks it's the greatest movie ever made. That's so great. So it's fun. It's fun to see the Krebs family get to taste that.
Yeah. Well, and I do think Cameron and Colin want some of this as well. They're enjoying being at all the premieres and doing the red carpet thing. And I mean, this is their first movie. To have this sort of result is pretty amazing. So I would call it a gift from Kenny. It truly was. I'm gifting this release to the filmmakers to say thank you. And wow, so cool. So I have high hopes for The Carpenter, as I do and did with Faith of Angels. I'm naturally optimistic, and I want to think about all the potential ways that it could make millions and millions of dollars and reach millions of people. But either way, I'm just grateful that, this weekend, Garrett, as far as I understand, we have 2 movies in theaters because there's still a number of theaters that have Faith of Angels playing. Faith of Angels is already booked for Thanksgiving weekend, so it's running through the month of November. So Can we high five through the video chat here? Like, dude, we got 2 movies in theaters this weekend. That is bonkers.
It's fun. Yeah, I mean, it is fun. So we hit our, well, let's see. So the numbers on Faith of Angels right now are at, on The Carpenter. We got 2 movies. It's hard to keep track. The numbers on The Carpenter, the release will be 500 screens. 504 screens, I think, was last night's count.
That's amazing.
Which is awesome. Which is 96 shy of the goal of 600. So that's, I mean, that's good to note that. And like, okay, like as a filmmaker, you set your goal and you're running for it, and that is the direction we want to go. To release an independent movie on 500 screens that's a feat. And Purdy Distribution has just been relentless as far as like how many more screens can we open, how many can we get. So I love that, and I think the takeaway is set a high goal and be pleased with your results as long as it's within that range.
Yeah, part of me is grateful that there's fewer screens because it means more marketing dollars per screen. And that's a good thing, right? I think we still got to go back to what Susan said in episode like 6 or 5 of high per screen average is what matters opening weekend. And if we can get 2,000 plus, then we're in the top 5 of any movie that's playing in a theater that weekend. And that means we can stay longer. So I think after Faith of Angels and seeing this one play out, it's like, man, I'd rather be in 400 screens and a 2,000 per screen average than on 500, 600 screens at 1,000 per screen average, because that means we're
going back here. So going back 6 months, then, if I'm hearing what you're saying, if we're recording that first episode again, we're saying let's set our goal. Is that what it would be? Say let's set our goal more focused on higher per screen average, a 400 to 500 screen release. And not worry about breaking into the top 10?
Well, I think with Carpenter, it's unique because there's a chance we have enough budget to do 600 screens and potentially get 2,000 per screen average, which puts us over $1 million weekend, which most weeks would put us at number 9 or 10, which I think is an important goal because of all the free earned media and marketing we would get from that. There's hundreds of outlets that would say, here's your top 10 box office for the weekend. And for everyone reading those lists going, what's The Carpenter? I've never heard of that. They click on a link, watch our trailer, buy a ticket. That's for free. So that lowers our customer acquisition cost, are the dollars it takes to get people to the theater because there's all that free awareness. So I think that's a different scenario than Faith of Angels, which was we didn't have a budget that could get us $1 million opening weekend. So that should have been a goal. So you have to have enough screens to be able to make $1 million. And we weren't going to be able to do that with Faith of Angels. So in that scenario, speaking now with the hindsight, I would have much rather had Purdy Distribution limit to 200 screens and pick the best screens that have historically performed on faith-based films, and then let the market decide how it expands from there. Instead of let's get as many screens as possible, which dilutes the marketing dollars we have to spend on each theater. And then you see what happened. We went 375 to 180 to 62 to 22. Like we dropped to a third of the screens over the last 4 weeks every week.
Yeah, I agree. I think Faith of Angels for that run, we could have been more disciplined in how many, and selective on which screens we opened on. And for Carpenter, you're right. It's a different strategy, and it'll be. I'm thrilled with how it's rolled out so far. I think we're positioned. I don't know if we're going to hit. I mean, if we say 500 screens, really to hit the top 10, we'd have to do a pretty absurd per screen average. But that being said, I mean, I think what we didn't foresee was the amount of press that we were going to get as far as earned media, or based on the concept of the movie. And so we've shifted into that this past week and kind of leaned into that. And we had a meeting with Film Frog to say, look, there are a number. I mean, there's some tweets out there that are getting 1 million reshares or likes or views or whatever, saying like, wait, what? Like an MMA Nazareth movie? What is this? And so we're saying, let's embrace that. Like, that is now what is drawing attention, and saying, yep, 100%, this is an MMA Nazareth movie, which it has always been, but it's a matter of like embracing what the conversation is and fueling that.
Yeah. If we're getting like really looking at the numbers, the upcoming weekend, as we kind of touched on before, and this is maybe transitioning into our box office conversation, there's really no wide releases that we're expecting to do $50 or $100 million. There's Lost in a Mountain in Maine, which I haven't heard of and doesn't have any big actors, goes wide. Hit Pig, which is an animated action adventure comedy. It has a decent cast: Andy Serkis, Jason Sudeikis, Rainn Wilson. So that one maybe does 20, 30. It's Viva Pictures, so it's not DreamWorks or Pixar or Disney. So it doesn't have the same kind of awareness or pull. And those are the only two wide releases. And so if we're looking at...
Well, there's one more. Oh. And we've always talked about not being able to predict. So the movie Here, Robert Zemeckis.
Yeah.
Were you going to get to that?
Well, it opens limited this weekend. And so it's on more limited screens. And then Here goes wide. I saw it. It's on the 15th. It goes wide. So it won't have the big 50 million, 25 million, whatever it is this weekend, I don't think. So
I thought they changed their campaign based on their reviews, and I think that they were just now putting it out on as many screens as they could for that opening week. They're not going to do a platform because of,
here's the thing,
perhaps the mediocre response.
Well, I hope for our sake they do go wide, because we would be better off if there's a big 50 million plus number one movie rather than a bunch of $20 to $5 million movies. Because if you look at all the weekends where the total box office has been down like under 80 million, the number 10 spot is 1.2, 1.5, 1.6 million, which I don't think will hit. We'd have to get 2,500 per screen average to be there. So it's actually better if the number one movie does 50 or 75 million, because then we could come in at number 10 on a 500K or a 700K total weekend. There's my prediction. Now we're getting into predicting box office.
yeah, that's a dangerous spirit to be in.
I don't want to do it.
It's fun. It's a fun game to play.
It is.
Fun game to play until it's your movie.
True story.
I'm excited, but you're right. There are a lot of releases. I mean, November 1st, Absolution, Soundtrack of a Coup d'etat, Lost on a Mountain Line, Aftermath, Hit Pig, Blitz, Here, Little Glue. I mean, every single one of these movies would have to be in the top 10 for us.
Yeah. But if you look at last weekend's, here it is in play, right? You've got Venom: The Last Dance came out at number one, did $51 million. So massive release, smaller than what they were expecting and smaller than what the first two movies did, but still $50 million opening weekend is a big release.
Was that its first weekend?
Yeah, first weekend. This is the weekend of October 25th through 27th. So
gotcha, yeah.
You only had 2, 3, 4. I mean, you had a lot of new movies, but only 2 in the top 10. And so the number 10 was Transformers 1, and its sixth week, it did 740,000. Number 9 did 750,000. Number 8 did 900,000. So 3 movies in the top 10 that pulled in less than $1 million. That's actually what you want. If you're an indie movie, you want a big movie, big tent pole that's going to pull in 50 to 100 million, which means that number 10 spot is available at 7, 8, 900,000.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm excited to see what the response is.
Yeah, we should call out and shout out though Your Monster opening weekend from Vertical Entertainment. There's our model: 651 screens, $803 per screen for 522,000 opening weekend. They missed it by a few spots. They're the number 14 movie, but I mean, no indie movie is going to be sad with a $500,000 opening weekend. That's awesome. So congrats to those guys. Congrats to Vertical Entertainment. That's big. All right, man. Well, another good episode and another exciting weekend. Like, it feels like it came too fast. We started this podcast 22 weeks ago, and we are now like here. We're at November 1st tomorrow. It's opening weekend of The Carpenter. People are going. I've had texts from friends that are going to go see it tonight in previews. Like, it's happening.
Yeah.
So it feels different to be kind of more on the outside looking in on this one, but it's even more exciting because I don't know what's going to happen. Like, just hearing that we're on 504 screens, like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. So good luck this weekend. Congrats, my friend. Like, this is 2 years plus in the making to film 2 movies, release them in theaters at the same time, essentially. And it's been so fun documenting this with you. So thank you and congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited for next week's episode as well, where we'll talk about the results. And I think we have an amazing A-list type guest in the podcast space. And okay. Thanks, man. Nice job.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Truly Independent. To join us on the journey, be notified of new episodes and screenings, and ask us questions about today's episode, head over to 3coinpro.com/podcast and put in your name and an email address. If you're a fan of the show, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast app and be sure to share this episode with a friend. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Our intro and outro music is Election Time by Kjartan Abel.